Welcome to Episode 7 of Take Charge of the Classroom, a web series designed to disrupt outdated behavior management models and help you create the classroom culture of your dreams. In this episode, we are looking at intrapersonal skills, how we can show students a better way to think, a better way to approach learning, and simply a better way to act. A lot of times, behavior management systems fail not because they don't show students what to stop doing, but they don't show students what to replace those behaviors with. So this is another offensive weapon in our fight against misbehavior. We are going to be talking about two different areas in which we can actually grow students' skills. So in the big picture, this is the last episode in our first wave through the Take Charge model using the immediate impact sequence. So we are going to be looking at intrapersonal skills, and then the next two times we hit this grow element, we will be looking at interpersonal and intellectual skills. So let's look at intrapersonal skills that teachers can help build in students. First is grit. You might be familiar with the term grit. It has gained a lot of publicity in the last few years. It has been researched heavily by Angela Duckworth. But grit is something that we can help instill in our students if we focus on the right thing. So grit is something that we want in our students. But here's the thing. In our society, we are wanting our students to show excellence. We are wanting them to achieve. And a lot of times we focus on the wrong things. We're focusing on their talents. We focus on the natural gifts they have and on their intelligence, but those are simply potential. If any of those are not fully developed, then ultimately they're not going to benefit the student. Grit is that determination, it's that resilience, it's that perseverance, the ability to bounce back that we really want to see in students, not just raw talent, not just natural gifts, because this is what Angela Duckworth found. You start with your talent. And then you need to multiply that by effort. So you take your raw talent and you put a lot of effort into it, and you practice and you practice and you practice and you practice, and it's not going to go perfect. But after a while, your talent multiplied by effort turns into a skill. So now you have skill that you can use, but you're still only halfway there. You have to take that skill, and now you have to multiply it by more effort. That's when you get achievement. So that this could be in sports, this could be in academics, this could be playing the piano, it could be in anything. You need to have a little bit of talent multiplied by effort. And then you need to take that skill that is born of that, multiply it by more effort, and that's when you get achievement. So guess what? We have a hard time really controlling the amount of talent that we start with, but everyone can own their effort. And did you notice that effort counts twice in this equation? And that is something that students can't control. So no, everyone's not going to grow up and be an NBA star. Everyone's not going to grow up and, be a prima ballerina. But if you focus on the effort that students are giving, they can actually do a lot more than they probably think they can. So how do we grow grit? How do we grow this grittiness, this resilience, this resolve in students, knowing that effort counts twice? Well, Angela Duckworth found that there were 4 stages of grit development. And think about, as I'm talking through each of these, where students can find this in your classroom. So grit and perseverance really starts with interest and autonomy. And that should sound very familiar. We talked about interest, which is a part of emotions, and autonomy in our last episode about motivation. But students need to feel interested in something, and it needs to be their choice. It cannot be assigned to them. So that means that in the classroom, if you want to grow grittiness, if you want these students ultimately to stick with the math problem, to stick with a long rating passage, to really keep going and going and going and not give up, which is one of the great outcomes of grittiness, you're going to have to help them find something they're interested in, and then give them the space, the autonomy to kind of explore it a little bit, because grit is intrinsic. You cannot assign grit to a student, so we have to give them a little bit of space to let them try something. We see this in pre-K classes all the time. If you have a pre-K class and if you have a building center, then you have probably seen this, to where you get a stack of these really heavy wooden blocks, various lengths, and guess what they're going to do? they're going to try to build the highest tower possible. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. They will sit there for a long time trying to build it, and it'll fall. They'll build it and it'll fall, and they'll make adjustments. That's interest and autonomy. You want to take that away from kids? Give it to them as an assignment. Give them the task of building a tall tower. And they might do it once or twice, but if they don't have that autonomy, that choice, then they're not going to have the grittiness that we want. So once they find something that they're interested in, that's their own choice, then they need to have practice, but feedback. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So exercising something the wrong way is not necessarily going to develop the skills that we want. We need feedback in order to make sure that we're doing it correctly. So that's where we come in as teachers. We give them space to practice, and we give them feedback so that they can continue to grow. For them to really, so most kids will pick something up, and they'll do it for a little while, and it's fun. But it's this third phase, this purpose, which should also harken back to what we talked about in our last episode, value. What's the purpose? What's the relevancy? Why should they stick with something? And this is where a lot of students start to jump off the train and they start misbehaving because they don't see the purpose and the relevancy of whatever the task is. So make that explicit for students so that they see the purpose of why they're sticking with something for so long. How is it personally important to them? And you can help guide that. You can't assign them, you can't tell them, but you can help them reflect. You can ask them questions. And then finally, there needs to be hope. And this kind of comes back to that competence. They have to feel like there's a chance that they can be successful. Because if it's something that there is no hope, that it is just far beyond their reach, like you're trying to teach calculus to a first grader, the grittiness is not going to make a difference. There needs to be hope of success. So you can help encourage grit in your students. And this grittiness is going to help in eliminating some of the misbehaviors that we see when they get frustrated, when they can't do something, by focusing on effort and then providing these areas, the interest and autonomy, the practice and feedback, the purpose and the hope. Because grit in itself is an abstract concept, so it's probably not going to be something that we might use the term, but kids might not be able to get their minds wrapped around it. Talk about effort. How hard did they try? And it's a really simple analogy with like running hard or working out, right? How much effort are you putting into something? They're building their muscles. So you can talk about stamina, you can talk about effort, but let them know that they are in charge of their effort. They control how long they stick with something, and that is going to help them feel like they are in control. So the other area that we can grow that's intrapersonal is a growth mindset. Now, most of you, if you've been in education for more than a year or two, you've heard about the growth mindset. It's turned into a very faddish thing, and it's not a fad. It's something that Dr. Carol Dweck has done tons of research over 3 decades worth, and it is very, very powerful. So brief overview, growth mindset, fixed mindset. A growth mindset is a mindset that people have, that some people have, saying that your abilities are not fixed, your intelligence is not stagnant, you can grow, you can become smarter, you can become better, and errors and failures are not necessarily bad, they just show you that you need to do something better. Fixed mindset is the opposite. Fixed mindset means that you're only born with a certain amount of skill, you're only born with a certain amount of talent, and fixed mindset really makes you risk averse. You don't want to try something new because if you fail, that's going to show you being as deficient because you interpret failure as a personal attack on who you are and your ego. So we really want to encourage this growth mindset, but rather than just putting it on a cat poster on the wall, how do we help build growth mindset in students? So one of the things that we do, we've talked about feedback a lot, but there's a lot of feedback that we as educators give that actually encourages a fixed mindset. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking with you about the feedback that you give your students and how to encourage a growth mindset feedback. So one thing that we'd want to avoid is reaffirming negative beliefs. Kids struggle in math. This is, I'm just no good at math. We definitely do not want to say, yeah, you're right. Maybe math isn't your thing, but that's fine because you're great at sports or you're a great reader. That is definitely not helpful. If they have a negative belief that they're not good at something, you do not want to reaffirm them in order to try to make them feel better because that's confirming a fixed mindset. Another thing that is not so obvious is that we compliment their intelligence. They're doing so great, and we say, oh, you're so smart. Oh, you're so intelligent. You're the brightest student I've ever seen. the more we focus on their intelligence, which most people view as a fixed entity, right? You're born smart or you're not, the more we are actually encouraging a fixed mindset. So rather than complimenting their intelligence, this is what we want to compliment or praise. What strategies did they use? So they got a problem right. They did well on a test. That's wonderful. You want to give them a compliment. You're so proud of them. But rather than focusing on how smart they are, praise their strategies. They can choose their effort. This is where it overlaps with grit. Students might not be able to choose how smart they are, how much they remember, but they can choose their effort. And when they choose their effort, then that gives them that growth mindset to where they are in control, and it's a matter and it's a function of them and their willpower, not necessarily how smart they were or were not in regards to their natural innate abilities. And we can also praise their resilience. Did they stick with something? Did they keep going? Did they fight through the obstacles? And so when we want to encourage a growth mindset feedback, when we're wanting to give our students praise or wanting to compliment them because they did a wonderful job, focus on the things that they can control, their strategies, their effort, their resilience, their perseverance, not necessarily the things that most people think they can't control, like their intelligence or their natural talents. Effort ultimately does not mean you're dumb. And a lot of students feel like this, and this is where the fixed mindset come in. They feel like if they have to try really hard, that means they're not good at it, that they're dumb. And you need to flip that on its head. Effort means you're learning. Effort means that you are in the best spot possible. Difficulty is desirable in the classroom, and the more we talk about that, the more we show that learning and trying and failing and picking yourself back up and trying again and putting that effort in there and growing, that's what you want. Because when you're not trying, you're not learning. So we need to really get kids to embrace the struggle and embrace that desirable difficulty so that when they see this type of difficulty coming at them, whether it's a hard problem, an assignment they're not sure what to do, rather than kind of folding up their tent and walking away, they embrace it and they're like, oh, this means I'm learning. So we need to send this message out there to students because a lot of times this impacts our behavior. When students feel frustrated, when they don't have the resilience, they don't have that grit, they don't have that growth mindset, they're very fixed, and they don't want to expend any type of vulnerability to try to learn something new, that's when the misbehaviors come. So the more we grow grit and a growth mindset, the less we're going to see poor behaviors in the classroom. So thanks again for watching this. As always, you can learn more about this web series and the book on my website, aarondaffern.com/takecharge. You can email me or you can follow me at Aaron Daffern.